Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to r/MaliciousCompliance, where in today's episode, OP encounters a rude idiot who refuses to listen to him and destroys his own car. As always, the stories are super duper satisfying, so sit back, relax, and enjoy. Hit subscribe if you haven't, and we're diving in. So a little background. I live in an apartment building with a backyard. My landlady has set up drying lines in one part of the backyard that we're free to use. I live on the ground floor and my apartment has direct access to the backyard. I work from home, so I'm almost always here every day. Now, I do have perfect view of the lines and I can see if there's any clothes hanging on them. Sometimes a fellow resident will hang their clothes and they will either forget about them or be somewhere else when it's raining. So what I usually do is I bring them in and leave them in a little waiting room we have in the building where they can easily find it. It's happened enough times that everyone already knows that I'm the one doing it. So a few weeks ago, one of the residents comes up to me and complained about how I handled her clothes. She said I laid them down on a dirty surface or I rumpled them too much. And of course, they were just washed, so there's gonna be creases. She might have also insinuated that some pieces were missing. Now, I don't cross-dress, nor do I have the fascination for other people's clothing. She then ends her complaints with, "I'd rather you not touch my clothes in any way. Next time, just leave it." Now, that's the first time someone complained to me about rescuing their freshly laundered clothes. I didn't think much about it though until today. So a few hours ago, I see her hanging her clothes to dry. Fast forward to now, I'm looking at them getting drenched from this awesome rain. She did tell me not to touch them. So she finally takes them in some time ago, and she had the nerve to ask me why I didn't bring them in. I then reminded her of our past conversation, and she calls me a childish F-word. Now, I do feel a bit sorry, as some of her clothes were apparently her work uniforms, and I know she'll be working early tomorrow. Update. I just received a text from the landlady asking why she's pissed at me. The woman made a complaint about me, so I tell the landlady everything. She said I shouldn't worry about it, as it doesn't violate any of the building's rules, so I'm good. Guys, I am totally confused as to what this lady wanted. Like, she gets mad at OP for taking her clothes down, but then comes back to get mad at him again for not taking her clothes inside. Like, make up your mind, what the heck do you want, lady? So back at the beginning of 2021, I worked with an insane CEO, a Karen if you may. She would constantly call team meetings to put down and belittle employees in front of the entire staff. Often, she would throw around some variation of, "Do I have to do everything around here?" and call everyone on staff incompetent. When we did do something right, she never gave us credit and she always took the credit for herself. She threatened firing everyone constantly and would randomly call us to gossip and make petty remarks about each other, pitting staff against each other. So one day, the CEO calls a team meeting. In a group text chat between some of the more chill employees, we immediately begin sending snake and eye roll emojis. So sure enough, we get on the call and she begins by bringing our attention to how my coworker Louise does not dress appropriately for work. Louise, who's also upper management, the COO, looks about ready to smack the CEO. The CEO then viciously begins tearing into Louise, commenting on everything from her hairstyle to her lipstick shade to how it's inappropriate for Louise to wear off-the-shoulder blouses that show her collarbone. She then tells everyone that we had better start dressing more formally or there's gonna be consequences. So the next day, the CEO calls another meeting. We all join and Louise turns on her camera. Now, I immediately had to turn mine off because I didn't want to be caught laughing my ass off. Louise was dressed from head to toe in what looked like something someone would wear to prom. Her hair was immaculately styled into an elaborate updo, her makeup was professionally done with lash extensions and everything, and she was dripping with what I assume were fake diamonds, tiara, earrings, necklace, bracelets, and rings. She also wore the most ridiculous navy blue satin formal gown with a faux fur shoulder shrug to cover her collarbone. My best guess is that it was an old bridesmaid dress, but she never did say where she got it. Immediately, the CEO was fuming and said, "Why are you dressed like that?" Louise then says to her, "You told us to dress more formally, and this is formal wear. Is something wrong?" The CEO then screams, "That's not professional for work." To which Louise says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I must have been confused. You said we needed to dress more formally, but I think what you meant to say was professionally." And with that, the CEO was livid, but Louise continued to rock the prom outfit all day, meeting with patients and clients and everything. Later that week, my coworker Tina texts our group chat. She tells us the CEO requires her to submit a detailed timesheet with what she was doing and what she was working on down to the minute for her entire day. She was gonna BCC us on the email, and sure enough, it pops into our inboxes a few minutes later. Tina had literally detailed her entire past 24-hour day, down to the minute. 6:45 a.m., awoken by husband's flatulence. 7 a.m., peed and changed menstrual pad. 7:02 a.m., began bowel movement. 7:10 a.m., completed bowel movement. 7:12 a.m., turned on shower. 7:13 a.m., tested water temperature with hand. You get the idea. Apparently, the CEO called her on her cell phone and berated her for sending such a detailed timesheet. Tina then reminds her that she had requested her entire day down to the minute, and didn't specify she meant her work day only. So finally, it's my turn. My job was in IT, and most of my work was as a database administrator, but I often helped with other tech problems. So one morning, the CEO calls me repeatedly at 2 a.m. My phone settings have it so if I miss 5 calls in a row from the same person, the do not disturb mode is turned off and the phone rings. So I see who it is, silence my phone, and refuse to answer. At 6 a.m., she calls again. Again, I refuse to answer. 7 a.m., I refuse to answer. 8 a.m., I refuse to answer. Finally, at 9 a.m., I call her back and she asks to hop on a video call. She then screams at me saying, "I've been trying to get a hold of you all morning. Where have you been?" I then let out a loud sigh and asked, "Can I help you with something?" Not even trying to hide my irritation, I literally was rubbing my temples and slurped on my coffee loudly. And she says, "You didn't answer my question." I told her I'm not going to. I was off the clock the time you called. She then says to me, "You are salaried. That means it doesn't matter if you work 100 hours or 1 hour, you get paid the same. So I expect you to be available when I need you." I asked her what she needs, and she says, "I need you to reset all of the company usernames and passwords. We're letting someone go today, and it's company policy to change all that." Now at the same time, Louise texts me that she's being let go. So I read the company handbook and make a copy of the page that says that the IT person must update the usernames and passwords and give the information to the COO. So I then change all the usernames and passwords to everything, from social media accounts to bank accounts to QuickBooks and emails. I send the usernames and passwords in an email to Louise and then send the CEO my 2-week notice. So 2 weeks go by. It's the last hour of my day. So what do? I change all the usernames and passwords again and send them to Louise, who was also celebrating her last day. I then log out of my email, put the company phone and my laptop in the mail, and spend the evening cackling at my malicious compliance. The very next day on Saturday, the CEO calls me repeatedly. Finally, she leaves me a long howling voicemail to say that what I did was unprofessional and she would make sure my reputation suffered and I would never work in this industry again. I wait until Monday to call her back. I ask her, "Hey, I saw that you called." She screams at me and says, "I need the usernames and passwords to everything." To which I respond, "I'm sorry, but I don't work there anymore. You're gonna have to contact your IT person to help you with that." To which she screams at me and says, "You are the IT person." I tell her, no, I was the IT person. Now, I'm a private consultant, and I would be happy to provide you my services at the rate of $100 an hour. She then says to me, "You changed every username and password, and you didn't provide them to me." To which I say, correct. Per company policy, when an employee leaves the organization, the IT person is supposed to update everything and send the new info to the COO. I was leaving, so I updated everything. I then provided all the usernames and passwords to Louise. The CEO then screams at me and says, "You knew she was quitting. Why would you give them to her?" Because the company policy says to transfer new usernames and passwords to the COO, not the CEO. Louise was the COO when I left. Caught in her own bureaucracy, she then had to spend weeks trying to gain access to all the company accounts. On Louise's and my last day, Tina and another employee quit, and another person announced her retirement. Once the 5 of us were gone, we were followed by several other employees. In total, 11 people on the 14-person staff quit within a few weeks. And the best part was, I got a new job making the same amount I did, but part-time in a government position with full-time benefits. So much for my reputation suffering. I did stay in touch with one of the employees who stayed behind. She said they've hired at least a dozen people, and all of them quit as soon as they could find another job. Guys, this is a legendary level pettiness. Like, oh my goodness. And seriously, that CEO needs to be let go. She sounds like a terrible person to work for. Concrete mixers are big. and trying to maneuver them around a crowded job site is like trying to play miniature golf with a tennis ball. The biggest problem is, of course, other people, specifically other people's cars. Now, no one's gonna lug around 50 pounds of tools any further than they have to, so if there's an open space near where they wanna be, they park there. Never mind that it's right next to a sidewalk or directly across from a driveway that a crew is obviously prepping. It only makes things worse when it's done by people who should know better, and done intentionally. So on this day, we're pumping grout walls in the late afternoon, which already has me in a bit of a bad mood. Now, grout jobs tend to be very slow. Each cylinder has 2 cells, and the crew pumps the grout into these cells, filling them all the way to the top of the wall. Grout is really just a term for a weak concrete mix that's pumped super wet. It has to be that wet to make it all the way to the bottom of the wall. Otherwise, it sticks to the sides of the cinder blocks or gets caught up in steel reinforcement. There's a lot of stopping and starting, as well as a lot of moving the pump. It all takes time, during which that concrete starts to go off and stiffen up. As we move to a new street, we find a line of cars parked along the side of the street that we're working on, just far enough apart to take up as much space as possible without leaving enough room to get the pump in there. It turns out that that's another concrete crew setting up to do patios. No problem, we're all concrete guys here and they know how it is. We asked them to move. I'm writing this post to tell you what their response was. So it turns out that they're waiting for their own pump and mixer to show up, and they intentionally block the street because they don't want us to be in their way. Their crew chief tells us that we can wait for them to finish and move on, or we can just work around them. Now, it's pretty obvious that he expects us to wait. Waiting is, of course, going to make the concrete go off even more, and will rack up standby charges for the customer. But trying to work around their cars is going to mean blocking the streets and rolling up the hose every time we have to move. It would take much longer, depending on when their pump shows up. It might not even save us any time. Still, Todd the pumper rolls his pump right up next to the lead car and feeds his hose out around it. Now, at the best of times, a concrete pump sputters like a nervous chihuahua, flinging small globs of concrete out the hopper. If the driver isn't paying attention and accidentally lets the concrete level get too low, the pump sucks in air. Now, feeding a concrete pump air is like feeding a hippopotamus a Lestra. It's not pretty, and it gets everywhere. So we finish and we're done with the job, and we're washing out the pump, when the crew chief, whose own concrete and pump haven't shown up yet, storms over to complain about the concrete splatter on their cars. I point out that we told them that we'd be pumping there and asked them to move, but they refused. At this point, he sees that I have a truck wash bucket strapped to my water tank, and he demands I let him use it to clean off his car. Now, I tell him that that's a terrible idea. That's like a smoking lounge on the Hindenburg levels of terrible. The stuff we use is designed to dissolve dried concrete, and it'll probably damage his car. The concrete's fresh enough that he can probably just rinse it off with water, but he isn't having it. He tells me to stop lying, that if it doesn't damage my truck, it won't hurt his car. Besides, he's done this before and he knows what he's doing. Now, keeping a concrete mixer clean is a downright hard task. No matter how hard you try, chutes overflow, pumps splatter, and plants huff cement powder all over your truck. There's a variety of chemicals used to clean off concrete, and most of the modern mixes are relatively safe. Our plant, however, provides a phosphoric acid mix to any drivers who need it, so it's quite common for there to be a bucket of it stashed somewhere on the truck. Of course, part of what makes these chemicals safer also makes them somewhat less effective. That's why some of us will bring our own cleaning products to fortify the company mix. These are the not friendly chemicals that'll leave you with a mild chemical burn. My bucket of fun dips down to the good old days of leaded gasoline, asbestos, and red dye number 2. Still, I warned him, and he assured me that he knew what he was doing. Besides, he's intentionally being a jackass and expected my sub to pay standby for his convenience, so I let him have the bucket. Now, I half expect him to stop when he pulls the lid off. The witch's brew in the bucket smells like Walter White's bathtub. Somehow, the fact that his nose hairs are curling up like a spider in a flame doesn't seem to faze him. The brush goes in the bucket, the brush comes out of the bucket, and then the brush slams onto the hood of his car with a wet slap. Now, I can only watch in mute horror as the man proceeds to not just clear off the concrete, but bathe his entire hood in hydrochloric acid, rubbing it in to get out all those nasty water spots. It's like watching an orphan unwittingly skin his favorite puppy. None of us stick around long enough to see the final result, but it was immediately apparent that he had scrubbed off the clear coat and was now in the process of etching brush marks in the paint. I don't want to be anywhere near him when the hood dries out. I let him keep the bucket. Yeah, I can't imagine that ending well, guys. I just imagine the paint bubbling and peeling and being a very, very expensive fix in the end. But hey, he was warned multiple times not to use it. For almost 20 years, I was in the service industry. It helped in a lot of ways, but probably ended up sucking me into that lifestyle for too long. A large portion of my serving and bartending career was at a chain restaurant. Think a house of steak that isn't in front. I had been with this establishment for around 5 years while going through college and starting a master's. I was working at my 4th location due to various moves for school. By this point, I was a server, bartender, and trainer, and I had been approached multiple times about MIT, manager in training, but I politely declined. All of this is to say that I felt like I had a pretty good standing and history with the company. Well, one day, a guy who, let's call him Chad, who I personally disliked, started going through MIT. Our mutual dislike started before my first day at work even, but to be concise, he was indirectly involved in a small confrontation between his friend, me, and the girl his friend was talking to. It's actually a pretty funny story in itself. If this blows up or people are interested, I'll tell it. Although we maintained civility at work, I'm pretty sure we were both aware that we didn't like each other. For several weeks, probably at least 2 months, bartenders weren't making money. For context, the bar area had around 9 booths, arranged around a U-shaped bar in the center, but bartenders weren't allowed to take those tables, only guests seated at the bar. So after several weeks of walking away with $40 to $50 on a weekend shift, we began pleading with management to help us. We asked for them to let us have at least a couple of tables in the bar lounge. We're talking 10 feet from the bar. Now, given that bartending was something you almost always had to work up to, we all felt like we had demonstrated the ability to handle the tables and not allow drink times or bar guests to suffer, especially as the actual bar was pretty dead most weekends, seeing as we were making so little. We were all offended to some degree, feeling like it was a double slap in the face of we don't care about you not making money and we don't trust you handling the lounge tables, so morale was low. One day, after we voiced our concerns to deaf ears, when the bar was of course slow, Chad basically orders me to do something like count inventory or do some other busy work. At the time, I was batching cocktails and doing bar upkeep, partially because when we got it done, there was a decent chance that one of us would be cut. Now, being cut meant that 1, the person cut isn't wasting time for little pay, and 2, the person staying makes more money. So I kind of clipped back something like, hey, I'm not doing that. I'm busy doing things at the bar. If you want it done, you should do it. At this point, I'm pissed because from my perspective, we've been pleading with them to help us and they told us to basically get effed. Now you're wasting our time even more with stuff that isn't our job responsibility. All the while, you just stroll around the restaurant doing nothing. Now Chad, trying to flex his new MIT position, says, hey, if you're gonna have that attitude, you can clock out and go home. I'm technically the new boss here. Now he clearly wasn't expecting me to simply go, okay, and immediately clock out. So I turned to the other bartender and told them that I was being sent home and I'm sorry. Now what Chad and the management didn't know was that by pure chance, I had run into a former bartender that left months ago when things started to go south. She was at her new serving job and she told me she was making great money. So the very next day, I applied and used her as a referral. I got the job and immediately put in my 2 weeks notice. I was sat down at the next shift and basically attempted to make amends and asked if I was leaving because of Chad. I said no, I was leaving because we weren't making money and y'all refused to help us, which is true. The Chad stuff was annoying, but I've never been a person unable to work with those that I don't personally like. When the rest of the bartending staff heard about me leaving, they were curious about my new job. I told them the truth, that I was making money and they're hiring. Within 2 weeks, 6 of my former bartending crew left and got hired at the new job. Within another couple of weeks, a few more joined. The House of Steak lost about 70% of their bartending crew and a few servers in the space of a month. They were definitely not pleased, mostly at my new manager, as that's just something you don't do. And wouldn't you know it, a month later, bartenders are allowed to take lounge tables. You know what they say, guys, people don't leave jobs, they leave bad managers. And I always love the stories where OP leaves and takes the whole crew with them. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of our /malicious_compliance. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the stories today. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, an entitled Karen rages at a mailman and gets jail time. And on top of that, she gets a pretty hefty fine. So go check it out if you haven't. And myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.